What is up, guys? This is Kobe here, and in today's video I am going to finally show you guys on my own how to fill out this Maple Scouter and kind of what it is and what it can really be used for. So with the Maple Scouter, you pretty much just use this website to fill in all of the stats that your character has, and then once you fill everything out, it gives you back this number. And you basically use this number and you see it as a gear score. There's also a hexa score as well that is based off of your 6-shot progress, and they will also use that score to determine where you are when it comes to progression and what bosses you can face within the game. Because I'm directing this at GMS players, I am going to be using my Mihao specs to be able to make this work, just so you guys know what I have going on. So first things first, there is an auto translate button at the top. You do not want to use Google Translate on this website because it messes it up. So instead, just press the auto translate button on the top right before we go ahead and get started. And then you press this button right here, and then we get to the input page. First, we start off with your level. So my Mihao is level 280, and then your class. So for the class, if you cannot type in Korean, or you do not know the class names in Korean and are able to type it, you need to erase the class that is listed and scroll down until you find your class. So for me, Mihao is right here, because even though you can translate this, you will not be able to find your class unless you just type it in Korean, which is kind of unfortunate for those that are trying to use it in English, but that's just how it is. And then down here, you want to be able to tick reboot if you play on reboot or heroic. Liberation, tick this if you have unsealed the Genesis weapon and you're liberated. This button here is the Mugong Soul. If you tick this, you can tick it again depending on whether you have a level 1 or a level 2 Mugong Soul. And then right here is if you want to use this for GMS or Maple CE. And what this really does, at least for GMS, is that it enables, the one thing that I really know that it enables is that you can put in level 3 link skills for, the ones that you have, like Arc, for example. And I do not know if there is anything else. So before we get started, you do want to pop your class buffs and your decent skills. When you click this question mark here that's next to your class, it shows you the list of buffs that you should be using. So on top of all of my decent skills as a Mihao, I need to use Maple Warrior, and I also need to toggle on my 2 toggles, which is Soul Rage and Soul Link, but I need to not be in a party while I have Soul Link active. The best tip I can give you for this point is you can just copy what it says here in the blue for your class, and you put it in Google Translate and it shows you what you need. But other than that, every class should have all their decent skills on, including combat orders, because the final damage is scaled off of having decent combat orders, as well as having just your own class buffs that you have 100% uptime for. Next up, we have your strength and dex values. So for both of these, in the actual game itself, you do want to hover over your main stat and your secondary stat. And on there, it tells you the applied value for base value, percent value, and percent value not applied. This can be a little bit tricky for some people because this is where the most common error lies. Because what happens is, I don't know if it's because if you have familiar badges or anything that's a non-KMS that happens in it, but your total value isn't exactly properly calculated in the game if you have one of those things. How you do it is you need to go ahead and double check it on your own before you put in the actual values that are shown on your stat page. So for example, my Mihao has 63,220 strength. If I want to be able to make sure that the applied values are correct, I need to take my base value, which is 6,428, and then multiply it by my percent value. So I have 496%, so I will multiply the base value by 5.96%. And then after I get that total number there, I will then add the value not applied, and then that is how I get my total strength. For me, it equals 63,220.88, which does round down to the exact number that I have shown on the stat window. And the same thing will apply for me for my dex as well. So I will put that in. The problems that most people run into for their main stat and their secondary stat is that their base values are too low, while their percent values and their percent values not applied are correct. And they have to increase it by a very small number, like 3 or 4, maybe even 2. There are some cases where you have to increase it by a lot more, but really you just keep increasing the base value until you do the math correctly and it matches the exact value that is shown within your game without hovering over the stat. And then next up, you just copy over like everything that is shown on the stat window below. So my general range with the buffs and the toggles that I have on is 103, 801, 385. My percent damage is 91, my boss is 480, my IED is 98.02, my equipment attack, when you hover over attack power in your game, you see your equipment attack percent. You need to take equipment only. Do not add it with your skills. It is only based off of equipment. So for me, it is 67. Critical rate, I would probably just put it at 100 by default, unless you play an archer class. If you play an archer class, you need to put in your exact critical rate because it will take vicious shot into account. Critical damage, 118.10. Cooldown reduction, 2 seconds and 5%. My buff duration is 64. My cooldown skip is 16. Ignore elemental resist is 5. Status damage is 13 and my summon duration is 10. And then down here, my arcane force is 1350 and my sacred force is 440. So now for buffs over here, there's one thing I do want to note. While you do have Wild Hunter, Bishop, and Sharp Eyes ticked, you are not able to turn these off. Some people did that in the past to kind of like cheese like having a lower conversion and whatnot, and I guess the people didn't like that, so they changed it to where you can just no longer talk with these off. So the buffs that they show are guild skills, and you just have to replicate the guild skills that you have within your guild. So for my Mihao, we're 45 skill points, we do not have IED. And then there's also a stat potion. I have the stage 10, so that gives me 30 stat. If you do not have a stat potion similar or at a lower stage, you just set this to 0. Echo of Hero, 4% attack. Legion buff, 30 attack. Ursus buff, 30 attack. Heal Blessing, that's 30 right there. Sparkling Red, 20% boss damage. Red or Blue Monster Park Potion, that's 30 attack. MVP Superpower is 30 attack. I usually don't use it, but I'm going to keep it ticked and I'll explain why later. And then VIP buff, which we usually get these during events, so I'll leave that there as well. The second alchemy buff they let you choose from is between the 10% damage potion, the 30 attack potion, smithing buff, aka 5% crit damage, or sparkling blue, which is 20 IED, which in this case it would be like one of these advanced potions that give 20 IED instead. I usually want to do my conversion with smithing buff, so I keep smithing buff on. And then the buffs over here are the buffs that go into the Tengu slot, the Pinot slot, the Onyx Apple slot, all that stuff. So your options are this fish buff here, which is 30 attack, this 5-stage attack potion here, which is 10 attack, and then baby dragon milk, which is 7 attack. The thing is, when I run bosses, I usually like to get Pinot buff if I want to try seriously on a boss, and Pinot buff is 40 attack. The reason why I keep MVP Superpower ticked is because while I do not use Superpower, I use Pinot buff giving me 40 attack, so I will have Superpower ticked on for 30 attack, plus this 10 attack reboot buff here as well, to add, add 30 plus 10 for a total of 40. Next up, we have links in Legion. So for Kanna, I have Kanna. I do not run Ilium. I run Arc at level 3, and then I do have these other link skills at 2, and then 6 and 6. And then for your Hexa, this is how they determine your Hexa conversion. I have to put in my numbers right. I have 20 on the first mastery, 7 on the second, 9 on the origin. And then for my skills, I have 10, 4, 14, and 0. And then down here, you put in your Wild Hunter Legion, because Wild Hunter has that special Legion effect, so it needs to know what level your Wild Hunter is. For me, I have it at 263. And then for Legion Artifact, if you have +1 mobs target, you have that on, but if you don't, you take it off. So for me, I took it off. And then for final attack, you put in the % final attack that you were getting from Artifact. So for me, I have it at level 8, therefore I set it to 24. And then Ozwing selection, usually if I solo bosses on the Mihao, I will run a comp 4, so I will use comp 4 instead. However, if you are running Roar and Weapon Jump, it is important that you put in your weapon's total attack so it can properly calculate how much stat you get from using a Weapon Jump rank. So we're going to put in comp 4, and then after that, you have Special Inner Ability, which includes passive skills +1 for the classes that need it, or +1's mob targeted. So with that being said, all of this is filled out. I'm going to click submit, and then I will get my answer. And these are my stats. My normal conversion is 80.3k for 380 PDR bosses. It's 80.3k, and then my hexa is 71.8k. And then converted power, normal is 360 million, while hexa is 282 million. So what this is if you divide your normal converted by your hexa converted, they calculate how much damage you can gain from the remaining 6 shop that you still have to get done. So for my Mihail, I am missing another 27.7% final damage from my Hexa Matrix. And then whenever you level up skills for your Hexa Matrix, your Hexa will go up. This bottom number here, while your normal stays the same. This only goes up when you actually make gear upgrades. When you make gear upgrades, both of these numbers will go up. But when you make 6 shop upgrades, only your Hexa number will go up. And remember, the damage you do on bosses that this calculator uses is determined off of what your Hexa Matrix, what your Hexa converted is. So for more detailed information, here are the bosses that players can do at certain cuts. So for my Mihail, soloing every boss all the way up to easy Kalos is listed as easy, like no struggle solos at all whatsoever. And then for hard Saren and easy Kaling, it is possible. You know, it's not a min cut run. They're, you know, pretty easy for me. At least I can get through them pretty fast. Normal Kalos, they have this at solo play minimum cut, so I am technically strong enough to be able to solo normal Kalos, but it will be a little bit of a rough run because of my percentage on here listed at 117.5. So what this percentage means is that if you hit 100%, that means you can solo these bosses at a minimum cut. It's more of like, how much percent of the boss's HP do you think you can dish out in 30 minutes, basically, or what it thinks you could do in 30 minutes. It's also important to note that for the Kalos specs on here, these are for after the nerf. After they change the cleansing cooldown to 10 seconds, and they show when FMA is going to happen without timing it, and then, you know, they show when the natural structure is going to spawn and all that stuff. The number that is below the boss picture right here determines what your Hexa Matrix is on that boss. So even though it says my Hexa is 71.8, it will not show 71.8 here because I do not have full level advantage on the boss. I'm level 280. Saren is a level 275 boss, so plus 5 levels is full level advantage. So it will show the complete number here. For Kalos, normal Kalos in P2 is level 280, so I am missing like 9 FD in P2, therefore it will not show me 71.8 here because I am lacking levels. The same goes for bosses like Extreme Lotus and normal Kaling, only listing me at 63.3 because these bosses are 5 levels above me. And if there are any reasons why the numbers could be any different, for example, like for Limbo or for Extreme Kalos and Extreme Kaling, it's because I am also missing sack for these bosses as well. When KMS players talk about what like the specs were when they clear certain bosses, whether it be in solo or a party, they will list their hexa conversion that they have on the boss. Not the actual number here, but the number that is below the boss. That way people can use that and gauge if they can, like, if they're good enough to run certain bosses or not. Like from a Mihail, I can solo up to normal Kalos, I can party normal Kaling, and maybe even XBM as it is currently, and then I am like slowly progressing up to doing X Saren and C Kalos solos. I'm sorry, not solos, party clears, my fault. Next up we have Ring Efficiency. This chart will tell you how much final damage you get off of Rings whenever you put like your actual stats in here. So I'm gonna put these all at 0 before I bring them back up to 4. But for strength, you just put in your exact values of your strength, dex, instant luck. So 63.2k strength, 10.5k dex, 6.3k int, and 6.3k luck. So with these numbers being put in, I can now get the proper values of Oz Rings. A Roar 4 gives me 52 FD while it is active. You need to keep in mind, these FD increases are only while the ring is active. So 52 FD from Roar 4, 30 FD from Weapon Jump, which is honestly not actually true because I didn't update my I didn't update my weapon jump number here, which I could change this to 4 for both roar and weapon jump, since I do have those wings at level 4, and then my weapons attack is actually 750. So we're going to submit that, and then we have these numbers, so we put these back in. So I need to reset the weapon jump. Putting that back to 4, I get 27% final damage, totaling 15.6, risk taker 26.1, critical damage 9.72, level jump 10.1, and a continuous 23.17. And then you also have a stat efficiency page, which shows you how much FD you get off of certain boss damage values, attack values, critical damage, IED, stuff like that. Honestly, as a Mihal, I'm going to ignore a bunch of the IED stuff, because while this may be true while I'm off burst, on burst, I have 100% IED, so getting 40 IED during my burst literally does not increase my damage at all. So sometimes it doesn't exactly take into account like certain like class skills and whatnot. And then we also have additional spec simulation. This is where you like just test like what is better between a certain flame or whatever and all that stuff. But over here, let's say for example I get rid of my super garbage fams, which are 215 IED fams, so I do minus 15 for both of these. And then I also lose the minus 3 attack on my fam as well, but I gain 90 boss damage off of 330% boss fams. If I actually train for proper boss fams, that would give me 6.6% FD. You could test a bunch of stats between whether you liberate your character or not, boss damage, attack, stat, crit rate all stat, cooldown reduction and skip, buff, final damage, secondary stat, IED, crit damage, attack, both arcane and sacred force, what level your character is, and then here is the B-pot section for strength and dex per 9 levels. For example, my extreme lotus at 280 is only 43.8, but if I were to level to 285 while making 0 gains whatsoever, that number then becomes 55.07, and 50% is eligible for possible dual play. Of course, these numbers do not change based on what class you play, so sometimes whenever people clear bosses at a really low number on the scouter, they tend to call those classes like extremely broken and all that stuff, and then if there is a class that like can't do this boss until a really high number, past 100% for the cut for solo, then people will usually deem those classes as pretty weak and not really doing too much damage. It is also important to know that you can save your preset on this page before, you know, you close it out and you want to delete everything. But you can click here to save, and then there are 3 different presets, so I can save it in preset 1, and if I ever want to come back to this again, I can recall the save preset, and I can just recall preset 1, then it will load in my Mihal's preset. The Scouter has other tools based off of, don't click on character info, because it's going to take you to a random KMS character, and it's going to show their characters, like stats and specs instead, and it might wipe this, and if you don't save it as a preset beforehand, it's going to mess you up. But then there's also an optimizer help, which it does not show for me, which I think it like auto-translated the website somehow. Okay, well that was working earlier, but now it's not. But there is an optimizer help for hyperstats and your hexastat as well, kind of asking what is the PDR of the boss you're gonna fight, what level are you, how many remaining hyperstat points do you have with your current build, and then you just kind of put in your current build, and then it will optimize it and give you another build, and it will show you like how much FD you would get from that new build. Usually, if you have a decent hyperstat, it either gives you a super small damage increase or just straight up no damage increase at all. And then down here, we also have Hexacore, which it shows your current core levels. And then also with these core levels, it shows you a build that they kind of sort of calculated on their own. And it's like a pathway that you can choose that includes like all the skills, including second mastery and everything. There are stops here for Hexastat. And whenever you see these Hexastat stops, they want you to get the whole thing done, straight from 0 to 20. So they have Hexastat 1 here pretty early on, and then they go for a little bit more, and then they have Hexastat 2 here as well. The reason why Hexastat 2 appears later is because it costs 200 fragments to unlock, versus Hexastat 1, which only costs 10. There are builds for Fragment. This is the Fragment build, if you're low on fragments, and then there is a build that's also for if you're low on sword. So this is mainly for like Rex server players. If you can buy fragments with the auction house. So you have all the money to be able to buy fragments, but you still have to grind out your sword. There's also other parts of the website as well, like you know, just a Star Force simulator that they have. There's an info center that shows you like the most recent updates the Scouter has. I know right now they're having a little bit of trouble using the open API for Hexstat 2, converting that in, so players still have to manually put that in, so they might have that as an update for the KMS players later. Donation, you know, you like their work, you just pretty much you give them some money. That's all there is to it. Record room, we have Extreme Lotus in 100. So this is like where they track like event clears, like the top 100 Exodus race, but for whatever reason they don't have the most recent hard limbo race in it, where you have to have like, you know, the first three parties clear the boss. And then there's also the total ranking, which ranks classes based off of their conversion, and also like the overall highest score KMS players in the whole server, with the highest normal converted stat player being Pangy, whose IGN is Adele. If you are not familiar with Pangy, he spends a ton of money on this game, and he has crazy ass streams where he just dumps a ton of cash. And he usually streams in Africa, but I believe right now he is currently not spending because he is protesting for a balance patch. So there's that going on right now. But ultimately speaking, I think that is about it. If you do have any questions or any errors that you are running through on the Maple Scouter, I would not recommend putting it in the comments here. I think I will go ahead and redirect you guys to the Maple Scouter Discord, the English one, which will be in the description down below. The link to this website is also in the description. I will also go ahead and add in the link to the actual Korean Maple Scouter Discord in the description if you want to check that out as well. But I imagine most of y'all will not be able to really understand what's going on in there. But in the English Maple Scouter Discord, there is a help center channel that I highly advise people to go to if you feel like you are having some sort of trouble, whether it be with the stat situation that I mentioned earlier or anything else. There are plenty of people in there that can help you out and get back to you if you are having any issues. And that is it for this video. I appreciate you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a better understanding on the Maple Scouter and kind of why people use it as like a general gear score and everything. Again, the hexa stat or the hexa conversion isn't necessarily the best metric to use the balance between classes, because different classes will deal with different damage, but usually the item conversion is a good way to gauge how good your gear is among quite literally every single class in the game, and you could share that number with anybody. But when it comes to bosses and killing certain bosses and doing boss cuts, I recommend you mention what your hexa conversion is below the boss image that is shown. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.